Welcome to Graphite Hub's interview series, a series dedicated to all things graphite. Now today we're joined again by Amanda van Dyke, founder of the Critical Minerals Hub. Today we're picking up part 2 of the natural versus synthetic graphite market. So Amanda, maybe if we kick this off, policy landscape at the moment is ever changing. However, would you mind talking about what the policy landscape is currently looking like in the US?
So the anode materials, batteries, right? Anode material suppliers in the US have been lobbying for the last couple of years for tariffs against China. And their argument is that their industry is being unfairly competed with by Chinese subsidization and control of costs. And China, because it produces so many of the batteries and all of the majority of the world's anode materials, has the ability to control where it allocates cost. And they would also infer, and they've stated, and obviously they proved their case to the US State Department, that China was essentially dumping. They were selling anode materials into Western markets for far lower than the real cost of production. And so they were not just subsidizing the industry, but that they were fudging the numbers, for lack of a better word. And that presented an unfair trade advantage to China and made it very difficult to develop anode supply in the West, or in America, at least. And they had a lot of proof, and they successfully lobbied the government to prove that these were unfair trade practices. And then the US government had two options. It could either go to the WTO and take 5 years to get there and allow them to continue dumping into the US market, or it could respond to the unfair practices with a tariff, which is a far more immediate way to go. Does it make batteries more expensive or anode materials more expensive? Yes, absolutely. But nonetheless, it was a response, like it was the anode material producers of America that did a huge amount of research and effectively proved that China was dumping, and that they believed the US government should do something about it, which is why they applied the specific tariff. Ultimately, this is a trade dispute, and all of the evidence I've seen is that they were telling the truth, and they presented very good quality proof and facts. I personally don't understand. So China said from less than 5 years ago, it used to cost twice as much to make synthetic, so coated CSPG, which is the anode product that goes directly into the battery. It cost over $20,000 a ton in China to make it from synthetic, and about 11,000 a ton to make it from natural. And they claimed they'd literally halved the price, and they provided no evidence whatsoever for why they had done that. And so I tend to believe that this was a reasonable reaction to unfair dumping practices.
Yeah. And although that announcement only came out a few weeks ago, are you starting to see any movements in the sector that could signal an improvement for the ex-China market?
I don't know about you, but I've had about 1,000 inbound inquiries. Well, this is kind of, so I understand critical mineral trade flows, and my inbox is full of people saying, do you know how to make synthetic graphite? Like, can you tell us how to do this? And I'm like, that's a little bit outside of my skill set. But I think people are waking up to the fact that there is an opportunity to make 50% of batteries going forward, and that it's not technically impossible. We all have oil and gas. And I do actually tend to believe that it's this combination going forward of synthetic and natural flake graphite that's really going to dominate the global battery market. And 50% of the battery is the anode, and there's no reason why all of that can't be done in the West. It's not a technological barrier. I mean, look, the Chinese are very, very good at making batteries. Their technology, they've invested an incredible amount of money in battery materials and battery material refining. But this isn't something we can't catch up on if we want to, which might be the reason why China is so aggressively competing on it, because they don't want the West to catch up.
Exactly. And that's the one thing I think people just aren't that aware of, is that how widely available needle coke is in the West. But so why do you think that hasn't translated into faster scaling up of synthetic anode production outside of China? Do you think is it purely based on costs? We just can't compete?
No, I actually think it's because of, so as I said, 5 to 10 years ago, 65% of the anode market was natural flake graphite. And so since then, China and Japan, to be fair, have been developing battery technology in-house. And about 5 years ago, they closed down the bit. Like they don't want to sell battery materials. They want to sell batteries, right? And they have closed down the technology. Like they've made China, it's industrial espionage. They don't want anyone to know what their secret sauce is for making batteries, and they're very good at it. Credit where credit is due. And I just think that there was a perception that graphite came from natural sources, and we didn't invest anywhere enough money in battery technology to realize what the reality of the situation was. China's invested like almost 100 times more than we have in battery development. And so we didn't realize it, and we left it there. But once again, I think we can catch up really easily. I think this is not, sorry, I hate to be cruel, but this isn't nuclear fission. It's not that hard.
Yeah, exactly. I feel, we're on a sprint and China's, near the end and we're just at the start. But I'd agree with you that I think we can definitely catch up. But one of the main issues that we're seeing in the West is the amount of time that it takes, let's just say for a natural graphite mine to get permitted. It takes years and years getting through all the red tape. So when we look at either policy or permitting changes, what do you think is one change that could be made to speed up the process so we can win the sprint with China?
So the issues with graphite mines are actually, frankly, every single mine in the world takes forever. This isn't a graphite specific issue. The mining timelines have gone from about 5 years from discovery to production 25 years ago to on average 16 to 18 years now. I mean, it's completely uneconomic, and nobody wants to invest in mining because it takes too long. And half of the reason is because mining's gotten more complicated, but more than 50% of that time is red tape, is horrible, overwhelming red tape because society doesn't like mining. If we really want to develop critical materials, battery materials, and catch up with China, finding a way to slash all of that red tape would be really, really important. So the EU theoretically tried to do that. They've got a Critical Raw Materials Act where they said regions don't like approving mines because while we know we desperately need more mines, they tend to be there's just too many NGOs and people who hate mining. It's just not worth the political hassle for politicians. And so basically they sit on mining permits and they come up with a million excuses for why they can't delay. They just keep asking questions, and they're like, oh, is there, are you going to make some little old lady unhappy? And I'm not saying the little old lady is not, but they blow things out of proportion on a regular basis. There's usually a way to deal with concerns about developing mines, and they ignore all of the rational reasons and slow it down. Now, Europe tried to say your jurisdiction must approve a mine within X amount of time, which isn't short, but isn't forever. But they didn't put any teeth behind it. So they gave a framework for how long it should take to approve a new mine and to approve various permits. But at any point in time, a really active NGO could stop a mine in its tracks if it knew how to bring up there's always objections.
Yeah.
So the problem is politics. The politics, what do they care more about?
Yeah.
Bad press by the anti-mining media or getting more critical minerals?
Yeah. Yeah, we hear a lot about policy, but it hasn't really translated that much into seeing the sector build yet. So I think everyone's getting a bit sick of hearing all of this about policy and no actual tangible investment.
Yeah. So what I would say is that, policy isn't policies, every jurisdiction has its own policies. And if the policies in my mind have no teeth, they're broad statements. We understand how important critical minerals are. Great. But what are you going to do to develop a critical mineral pipeline within your jurisdiction? What policies that force jurisdictions and individual mining regulators to be fair? I'm not saying, look, you don't get to do bad stuff in mining anymore. The days where you could ignore environmental regulations, ignore social concerns and community concerns are gone. Nobody gets to do that anymore. But if you can build a mine within a safe framework, you should be allowed to permit it within an expeditious period of time, as long as you check the right boxes. And you shouldn't be able to oppose mining development based on your personal principles. You should only be able to oppose mining development if it's not being developed in a socially or environmentally responsible manner. That's it. And you could make those laws very easily, but other than broad statements of saying we support critical minerals, they haven't done that. I just don't think any of these policies have any teeth.
No, and I think that's where partnerships, especially in the graphite space, is where we do see more development. Graphite companies working together with the more downstream players and the OEMs and the battery makers. I think that's where we're seeing the real progress.
To some extent, yes. I think, look, from a funding perspective, part of the problem with expanding the timelines, like taking it from 5 to 15 or 20 years to develop a mine, means it costs a lot more. I mean, time is money, and the time and the delays and all of that, they're all extremely expensive, and they've scared away a lot of investors from the space because it's just too long an investment timeline for people to reasonably put their risk into. And the fact that you're going to have an end consumer, which is a large, respected buyer, whether it's the US government or an OEM or GM or something like that, is a huge support. It gives the market a lot of confidence, but it doesn't really do anything to fast track the fundamental permit. I'm not saying it doesn't help. It helps a bit.
Yeah.
But I think that finding a way to streamline mining development is, from a policy perspective, is the greatest challenge to the mining industry. And I don't know if we'll ever develop critical mineral supply chains in the West unless we address that challenge.
Yeah. No, something needs to change quite soon. Otherwise, China's going to continue to dominate the sector, which they have for the last, few decades. So yeah, but no, I appreciate your time, Amanda. It's been fantastic to have you on here and hear your insights. So yeah, we look forward to having you on again here sometime soon.
Okay, I hope that was helpful. And I'm so happy that people like you are doing this work to bring really important information and knowledge to an industry that's very misunderstood. So thank you so much for having me. I hope I can help a little.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been great to have you on here. And so I think, the graphite industry for far too long has been underappreciated and there's just been a lack of understanding. So thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode of Graphite Hub's interview series. We'll see you next time.